Marisa, I told you, I have consultants.
That's what it's all about.
And Peter and the boys, Pete and the boys and the girls, maybe I ought to call them again. I have a free day tomorrow.
I need a little more notice than that to do interviews.
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Okay.
I would just call and say, hey, we got them.
I know
got
that
my
tomorrow,
website.
I'm actually gonna be up at UAR tomorrow. I'm on our grievance committee for the state. So, I'll be up there tomorrow.
Terry's just on the grievance committee. He's the chairman. Anybody that has a grievance, please, see.
Gets to talk to Terry.
See,
Get in line.
right behind this gentleman.
Yeah, that's right.
But lucky, no more teenagers.
Tell me what?
No more teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
But you have grandchildren that are coming up to about that age, don't you?
Well,
Teenage years.
oh yeah. My oldest grandson's, oldest grandchild's on mission.
So he doesn't count anymore.
And then a whole bunch.
We're up. Ready?
I don't know.
Oh.
They're all in the other room.
That's
Let me
what,
go ask them.
Okay, well,
The computer's here, but they're
so
all
we're
over
going
there.
to Cabo again, or wherever, Casablanca, I can't remember.
Cancun.
Oh, Cancun.
Cabo in November,
Where did you go in Cancun?
just on that hotel, whatever that place is. So we did do a few, let's see. One of the roads, not just the one
The Book of Mormon tour,
Robas?
that's by the,
which is not,
The lights will stop.
Not Shalha,
are you away?
not Tulum.
Tulum.
Tulum. It's really awesome.
It's pretty hot. We did some,
Wait a minute, come again, you said it was pretty hot, but it was cool.
yeah,
Okay,
the cenotes were refreshing.
The cenotes are so,
20 years ago.
it's a lot of stairs down some of them though.
So we did some snorkeling.
You ever go like there?
Did you?
Pretty amazing.
oh,
That's
that would be
awesome.
cool.
He was.
I love skydive and snorkeling. I'm not, I just like seeing what's underneath.
We did a flashlight test, right? By looking at the water, you thought it was pretty shallow. It was the angle of the light that was,
Anyway, he
the
took
bottom was,
Mike's place.
it's crazy.
He was probably there
It was reflecting.
5 years.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Between Mike and Dennis place.
You ready, Matt? Is it?
It's all right.
Is it? We're live. So sir, shall we turn it over to you?
Okay.
You're officially begun. Oh, now Cheryl's here, we can officially.
Oh,
I'm kind of like watching for Jason, so I can let him in, but he's not here yet.
Oh, sure.
So the first item is an office building up on 1600 North, right by the freeway, right behind the old Maverick, or I guess it was Common Sense, now it's a new Maverick. Next to the bowling on the little level, security metrics building. So proposing a 3-level underground podium, so the main level will be parking and then 3 levels above for an office structure. Parking to the east. One of the conditions that we'll talk about is that this, you can't see it, hold on.
I dressed today.
So this line right here is next to residential, is a piece of the condos.
Right.
So this does need to be a masonry wall. There's an existing fence, and during our review, apparently we couldn't catch the fact that needs to be masonry, so that is a condition. So they have enough stalls, 171 is required, they're providing that amount. HSO requires equal to the height. This is 73.82. The height of the overall height of the building is 60. So they meet that requirement. Landscaping. It slopes. It's a fairly significant slope right here as it goes down into the freeway portion. So
It really is.
So how are are you going to landscape that putting green or?
So,
That's what it looks like.
so just a little, there's the detention basin here, that'll be probably below.
Yeah.
The off ramp level. This will all be aggregated, it does slope down here, so the underground will be actually on a lower level. So the.
But it will be
units
visible from the,
Will be visible, yeah. The units over here, are probably gonna see the 2.5 stories above, not the full, just because of the height or the.
well, it has something about on that side, I think it's 44 feet, 6 inches or something.
Yep. So you can see the bottom level is parking, then the 3 levels of office. So this is the
Yes, it does.
office structure. This is security metrics, they have a retaining wall there, so that wall is part of security metrics, which is over.
So they'll have to match that wall on the backside.
Or something similar, yeah. Yep. Then you can see the ramp down, so main level parking is here, ramps down for underground parking. Allocation. See, the main structure will be located about right here, with the main parking here, and the access will be in this direction, or they can work their way around this access up here. So there are 2 access points on 16th North.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
I thought it was well explained in the presentation.
I think compared to what it is now, it'd be beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
The only request is that we add a condition that the Main Street wall on the south
Yeah.
property line be added.
So is that in the,
Hills Hidden is currently a 1-lot subdivision. There is 1 home currently located on that property right here. He came in and wanted to build a lot here and a lot here. Because of the slopes that come around, which I'll show you in just a minute, it's pretty steep. We don't allow any development other than a small amount of grading if it's 35% per grade, which is slope. And so really the only way that they could make that work, I'll just go to this map right here. You can see the different slopes, red being over 35%, yellow being between 20 and 35, and then the green being 20 or less. So the ordinance does allow, you can see the billboard here, I don't know if you can see that
Yeah.
line. So they can, within this, so the red area, they can do up to 20% of that area to grade. And then the yellow could be graded as well from the top down. So what they're gonna be able to do is create a lot right there. And then the remaining property, which will belong to this existing home, most likely could not be developed unless the ordinance is changed to allow grading into a hillside.
And then what about the landscaping here? Is there a question for my position? Do they
So
have to?
it's a single-family home, so we require it to be landscaped, but we don't require a landscaping plan. So we don't have it as part of this. The approval tonight is simply to subdivide it into 2 lots. Existing home and the remaining lot.
That's gonna be interesting for the designers on it. If they have to landscape that whole thing.
So the access is right approximately here, which is fairly flat.
Yeah.
It gets pretty steep as you go.
You know, down there. They look doable.
Any questions on that one? You can see the slope on that, so this is Hidden Hill, or Hidden Hollow, excuse me.
As far as retaining,
So if you want a retaining wall to, help, but you can't build a retaining wall into a 35% slope. If it needs a retaining wall for slope, we don't allow it, you have to. But if it's decorative or some type of maneuver within the buildable area, you could do a retaining wall to retain it.
you know that one off the, off 400 South that goes down to Carterville, where we approved that, it's a 16-foot retaining wall that they built back there. Have you seen that? 'Cause I remember approving it, but they, when you drop down 400 South, you go north down to Carterville, where that vintage,
Vintage on the river.
yeah, the cul-de-sac, there's a cul-de-sac down there with the gated, and then the old Carterville runs along
Oh,
at
right.
the bottom, and they have to keep it, right there, that, I'm fairly certain that retaining wall is probably about 16 feet high.
And there are a few retaining walls, like the Walmart, for example.
Oh, yeah,
We probably wouldn't allow that under current conditions.
because they just did that a couple of years ago, Carl, was that? The one on 400 South that drops down to Carterville, where he built that big retaining wall on the back of his property so he could fill and extend his backyard. You remember that? Because that was a good slope.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Okay.
So next one is a existing condominium, or existing fourplex. There's 4 units at this location, just behind Steve Ogden Carpets, which is right here. Existing fourplex. They're coming in to do townhomes, so basically converting them into 4 separate units that can be sold individually. The remaining of the property, including the parking, will be common, but they will own the ground and the building itself. So that's what
So there'll be no garages in there from what I.
no garages, simply just taking it from an apartment and converting it into a.
Do you remember the old Toro Apartments? Right here on 200 South, about 200 East. Do you remember those? They used to be the Toro Apartments. It was owned by Bill and Ida Olson, who owned Bill and Ida's restaurant, and there was that.
We go way back.
That is way back.
Well, they changed it, I think, to the Willows condominiums, and I think that's what they did there too. They divided them up into all saleable.
Okay, yeah.
So this is similar only on a
Similar.
smaller scale.
Yep, and I think the owner has offered each tenant the opportunity to purchase. If they don't, then he may sell. But they're on notice that they do have their first right to buy if they want to buy.
Okay.
They get a discount if they use him as their agent.
Yeah, they unlisted.
And we will suggest, no.
Oh, no, the owner is an agent.
Oh,
So here are the apartments back there. You can see newer than the ones up front. But that's any questions on that?
is there any way we can include those other ones?
Yeah.
Long and
Maybe
new,
They-
nicer.
Wish.
Did they already do it? Because it talked about working with the building.
So they came in about a year or so ago and actually made sure that they could do it. And there was some minor modifications that they had to do with the building permit. And they did that. And then about a year or so later, they came in and applied to actually convert it. So that work has been done already.
Oh, so they did get a building permit and did the work they had to do.
Right. Yep.
So this is really the last step then.
This is, yeah, one of the requirements we have in the ordinance is they have to make that happen before they come in and actually split it out. So they have to get the permit, they have to make those corrections, they have to get our building official to actually sign off on that they can be then individual units.
And they
Once
can
that's
walk to the Korean market to get kimchi
Good.
from there.
They can,
Yeah.
and also over to the Wiener Schnitzel and,
There's a relic
Or
salon.
just up the road to the Apollo Burger.
Yeah, not bad. That used to be Kenny
Well,
Rogers
counties,
Roasters.
it did.
Yeah, that was good. And the Wiener Schnitzel used to be the Wiener Schnitzel. That's-
Remember State Street
And it still
Road?
is.
That was my favorite.
I was sad when Kenny Rogers left.
Oh,
How
me
old
too.
are these people, Jason?
I'm pretty sure I'm one of the youngest in the
You and I
group.
interrupted.
You remember to throw it
I
on.
got food poisoning at Kenny Rogers, I
Oh.
don't miss it at all.
Oh,
Let's see, 3.4
Tomatoes.
is a typical subdivision where they're wanting to come in and put a pool in their backyard. They need to vacate the 8-foot easement that's in the back. So it's relatively simple. This portion right here, there is no easement along this portion. There's one here that will remain, one on the front that will remain, and they're vacating this back portion. So
but that was pretty simple.
pretty simple. Any questions on that?
How big is the pool?
I don't know, I'm waiting for my invitation to come in.
How do we get so many utility easements that are so easy to get out of? Is it just,
We basically blanket the entire lot, typically up front, and then as time goes on, they may or may not use them. And if the utility companies are willing to vacate, they usually do. If they have a utility in there, they won't, or plan to use it in the future.
I guess we never see those ones where they say no.
It's hard to plan, so basically the city, and typically cities in general, just require all the lots to be, not always, but a lot of the time.
Like in my subdivision, they would never vacate the easement because all the power lines
Right.
come right down in between the houses on either side. So,
In this instance, for example, this lot did not have an easement, this one does, so a lot of us do every other one. It's really up to the city engineer how they want to do that, but we it changes over time, and this subdivision was probably done a while ago. So. That's it, the 4 items.
Okay, we've got 35 minutes let's talk. Carly, you want to start the discussion?
You got me craving Kenny Rogers now.
I know. I like a ball too. But you know, my favorite still is that Crown Burger up on North Denton.
I way
good.
prefer the Paula Burger. I know they should be the same, but they're not. Because the one on North Temple puts relish in their fry sauce, and that's disgusting.
Yeah, you're right. That is good. Supreme,
Who
I
does
think, is
that?
doing that now too.
Only
Crown
some of
does
the
it?
Crown Burgers, the one on North Temple does.
Okay, one of the things, you know, the old CUWC that WDC owns? I don't know that they own it down
They do.
at University Park, so they did purchase that.
Yep.
Do we have anything that we anticipate seeing at any time in the future? Because they also own the Cream of Weaver.
So that one I've talked to them briefly. They do have a tenant, at least a few weeks ago, they had a tenant move into the office portion. So they may just rent that and just wait and see what happens in the future. We are working on the economic study on the Parkway, so I think we're waiting to see what that happens and how the city council reacts to the market, future demand of office or retail and things like that.
Do we have the most updated copy, and this would be of interest to Terry also, I believe, most updated copy of the affordable housing study, or the housing need study?
I think we do. I have to find it in my piles of stuff.
Just guess, how many units are we short for the demand in Orem City itself?
We have that, Matt, do we have that number?
What was the question?
How many units were short in Orem? I don't know if we have that specific number.
Based on
As
demand.
far as demand, no, I don't think we have that.
I know we had it several years ago, that it was something, several years ago, it was like 6,000 or 8,000, I can't remember, it was a
Well,
number.
It really depends on what type of assumptions you want to put into the model. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, if you want to look at the county versus, you know, the state, or, you know, if we want, and the assumption being whether we want to stick to the same growth rate as the rest of the state, or are we going to assume that some of that growth rate is going to go further out, or do we need to accommodate that also? Really, that number depends on what assumptions you want to build into it.
We all know what assumptions.
I was talking with the trip people in the last couple of weeks about the west side, you know, the new through Stockton on the west side of Grantsville, running that, it's a 4-lane highway, I believe they're gonna run through there.
Yep.
Yeah, all the way back, up, tying it up into on the west side above Fox Hollow, they've already graded for the freeway that goes through there, runs down all the way to, I think, to Nephi. And they talked about 2,000 acres that have been set aside for an international airport down in the southwest corner of Utah. So I'm not certain, but they talked about that, trying to mitigate the traffic that's coming, for us, coming through our city, you know, on the freeway. And they're saying that it will eliminate maybe 75% of the truck traffic currently on I-15 coming down here, if they do that, they finish that corridor, and they have the funds in place. And I think it's tentatively going to Ames. They're gonna form a new organization, because Ames is working right now with Staker Parsons and Wadsworth. And they're doing the North Dade Corridor project. Plus, they've been given the I-15 project from Brigham City to Nephi.
Wow.
That's huge.
And the funds have been allocated for that,
From Brigham City to where?
Nephi. To Well, except for the new sections that are just
Do
written,
what?
to replace the concrete.
And put asphalt back?
That's.
Or just replace the concrete?
Well, to replace, but right now they're finding with the new technologies and the polymers and things that they're using on the asphalt, that it has a 50-year lifespan. Concrete's supposed to have that too, but we're having, evidently, they're having problems with the concrete that they replaced for the Winter Olympics. And it's more like rumble strips, for some places, when you drive.
So.
You got a massage, so that's okay. But with Orem, we've got what's called the Lakeshore Parkway. Do they have any anticipation as to what that is going to
So I know Provo's bringing it up to 2,000 probably the next few years. I'm not sure Sam could address that, but I'd imagine the next 5 years that connect the Parkway to Geneva Road.
So, yeah.
Lakeview Parkway, when is that? Our
Oh,
section.
so for Lakeview, I know this fall we will submit for our concept report some additional funding to start moving forward with probably an environmental study, more beneficial one, as well as probably some corridor money to start purchasing some property through there. But that money, we wouldn't be able to do anything with it till maybe 2025, 2026, unless we can take the money that we have, that we put on 16th North for the MAG funding, and maybe move it to Lakeview Parkway. Because right now, we haven't really been in too much of a hurry to do anything because there hasn't been any need for it, but with UDOT looking to put out environmental, they're putting out an advertisement for consultants to do their environmental study for the widening of Geneva Road, actually evaluating the current EIS. And then also coming from the south, Provo's looking to at least get 2 lanes built up to 2000 South, as well as connect 2000 South over to Geneva Road. So now that there's gonna be all these pieces that are starting to come together, we'll look to get our environmental, as well as then start getting some corridor preservation dollars and kind of moving forward with that.
Is 2000 South divided between Provo and Orem?
Yeah.
Not the road.
That is the divide.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's,
that's the dividing.
so that's
Is
the
it right down
boundary.
the center, is that
No.
our boundary?
Provo owns it
We-
to the north.
So from
They
so in Orem, if you're heading westbound on 2000, the roadway is all Orem's until you get to the westerly tracks. And in there, I guess probably between the tracks or from, I think I-15 to those tracks, Provo was on the south side and the boundary goes up to the back of curb. But once you get to the UTA tracks and head west and then continue to head west, then the boundary shifts to the back of curb on the north side, all the way down through to the lake. So the roadway itself is gonna be Provo's, but north of the back of curb is gonna be Orem's.
So when you talk about them expanding to 4 lanes on 2000?
No, so we've agreed to right now that 2000 South is just gonna be a 3-lane facility with wide shoulders. The 5-lane facility is gonna be Lakeview Parkway, but they'll just come through and build 2 lanes for now. I think the plan is, and it was that even for us, Orem would secure the right of way for all 5 lanes. We would build 2 lanes, and I think at some point, depending on how MAG looks at it or how UDOT looks at it, I could see UDOT and Orem and Provo doing a jurisdictional transfer and having Lakeview Parkway be a UDOT facility. And they could probably build the rest of it, because it makes sense. It's gonna tie in from Geneva Road all the way down. It's gonna go right by the airport and then swing back around and tie into I-15. So it makes sense to have that redundant facility there.
Well, is Lakeview,
Take Geneva Road out.
I think UDOT, and they might still maintain Geneva Road as well, but it just kind of depends. I know right now they're gonna do an EIS, because Geneva Road was supposed to be a 5-lane facility, but as I got further south in Orem and then through Provo, there's a lot of historic homes in there, and the cost would have been a lot to widen it. I think there's still some grumblings of maybe try to widen it to 5 lanes, but I mean, 820 North is kind of stalled a little bit too, so I mean, that whole area of Provo, Orem is kind of stalling out, but there is some agreement with Lakeview Parkway and where they need to have this parallel facility to I-15 and regional transportation, it would make sense for them to take over that facility versus having it be Orem or Provo's.
So, I didn't hear you, so where's the connector gonna be to I-15? Have they decided that yet?
Where Lakeview Parkway will?
Well, where will it connect to I-15? Is it 2000 or is it gonna be?
So Lakeview Parkway right now connects as it swings down in there at the University Avenue interchange. It actually already connects to that
1860
interchange.
south.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
Something like that.
something in
Yeah.
Provo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whatever that interchange is. So Lakeview Parkway won't connect to I-15. It'll connect into Geneva Road, roughly where, a little bit north of that AC property, there's a big home that's on Geneva Road that's been for sale. So it'll connect into Geneva Road.
It's only
in that
25
area.
million.
Yeah,
So there's not a plan for another I-15 connection down there?
no, I think there's been some speculation that maybe if there was to be an interchange at 2000, it would just service the west side of I-15, it wouldn't necessarily connect to the east side. There just hasn't been a lot of traction both from that area of Orem and Provo to have a connection there. Even though they would probably thoroughly enjoy having one there, they don't wanna have one there.
But there was a lot of, when they talked about that, there was a lot of pushback
Oh,
from
yeah.
the residents.
Well, and the 8 South one too was a huge pushback too.
Yeah, and I think it would have made sense had Provo not installed their water tank right there, just on the west side of State Street, because you could have punched through 2000 south to tie into State Street, but really doesn't make sense because 2000 doesn't tie into anything, it just goes to Columbia Lane and dead end, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to actually put it there anymore.
They talked about 820 north in Provo,
Yeah,
but that's really close to Center Street.
yeah. 8
And
south,
that may still happen there.
8 south for us won't be an interchange, it'll just be an overpass.
There's a
So
lot
they're just gonna connect,
Yeah, they'll just go across, we won't necessarily put in an interchange there.
so it's
of
cheaper
the
to
problems with 820 north.
It's just too hard, too much of a weave.
It's too close to the railroad tracks.
Yeah, that's.
So you'd have to have a structure that
Yeah.
went from I-15 across the railroad tracks, clear up to the bench.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't make sense, I think.
No, it would make sense to service the west side of I-15 at 2000 south, and then to service the east side right there at the curve, Independence and 17, whatever it is. I mean, it would make sense to do that, but both of that neighborhood of Provo won't agree to that. But it would make sense that you're right at the curve, you come up, you could go up Main Street into Orem, or you could take whatever north that is down into Provo. I mean, from my standpoint as an engineer, looking at the grid and traffic, it would make sense to go there, but the residents don't wanna have that there. But it would just alleviate a lot of traffic off of Parkway, but it's too political, so I don't have to worry about it.
So that's Center Street, going on to Center Street off of Geneva Road, in Provo, not Orem, but Provo. Could that be even more confusing than it is?
Oh, yeah,
You know, if you go left, if you go right, you stay in the middle, it's like, man.
yeah, that's
Takes a
kind
while to do that.
I kind of veered to the right myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's kind of hard.
So an 820 north would be probably advantageous for Provo residents to avoid that intersection. It is pretty close.
And that's all, was it commercial in there, a lot of it.
There's a street.
Guys, that only took us 15 minutes, so let's talk about some
There's
of
left.
What happened to that property on University Parkway where the company, I think they bought it, wanted to build a Maverick and a
Yeah,
hotel?
that's WPC, we're.
Yeah, so-
They're still on hold. I think they've leased the existing office building,
Oh,
and they're just gonna sit on the other property until.
And they own the Cream and Weaver
Oh,
property
that's
too,
the
they
one.
came into us once before and we said, no,
on Cream and Weaver too?
they own that property.
Oh, no, we didn't say
But it's
no.
the other one we said. no.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, for the Maverick, we didn't,
no, sorry.
we like Maverick, just not there.
Not on the Parkway.
Yeah, I mean, traffic, I mean, children being killed, crime increasing.
Too much soda, we gotta cut down.
Wait, what?
Whatever happened with the gas station on Geneva Road and 2000 South.
So they submitted actually this week, so you'll probably see that site plan probably a month or so. So they did get
So
to,
did they change it, or did they just pull it out, pull it back?
change, what do you mean change, sorry, what do you mean change?
Well,
It's usually-
is it still the same, because it came to us once,
For the rezone, and now it's gonna come back for the actual
so
site.
did the rezone get approved?
It did. Yeah, so that we, yeah, they've submitted with a little bit different building, so we're gonna make them go back to what they told us it would be, because it's part of the agreement. So, but as far as the location and gas pumps and things, it's the same. And then UDOT's installing a traffic signal there, probably, Sam's the next 6 months or so, 2000 South, Geneva.
The PSC was today, which is kind of their plan review, their final plan review, so I would imagine that they'll go to advertise here before too long, and it could be built this fall, depending on weather, either this fall or the spring, for sure, for 2000 Geneva.
If Lakeview Parkway comes in at Casey's house, that's going to mitigate access on the Geneva Road, correct? South of that. Well, isn't there going to be a space in there where Geneva will almost become a recreational walking path?
No, Geneva will still be, what'll happen is right now Geneva Road, the EIS for that area calls out for that area to be a 5-lane facility. And what would happen is Geneva Road, because that's what they're doing now, from University Parkway down to where it's like 18-something South Geneva Road, where Lakeview Parkway is going to tie in. They'll build the 5-lane facility, so just past the temple and then like a few more parcels south is going to be a 5-lane facility, and then from there south it would be a 3-lane facility. So right now it's just 2-lane, but ultimately they're looking at a 5-lane, so you have a middle turn lane, widen shoulders, and you have a multi-use path on one side.
Geneva will tee into Parkway.
Yeah, so what'll happen is it'll kind of swing down, and then from there south, Geneva will come up and T. So the bulk of the 5-lane traffic would essentially be aimed to go down Lakeview Parkway. So yeah, there's no way we just turn it into a recreational thing. There'll be a lot of people abandoned access, so that'll always be there.
And any updates on tracks?
For like just throughout our county.
Down through State Street?
So there's the Central Corridor Transit Study that's been completed, and the preferred alternative is to come down State Street. Now, whether it's usually what they call a fixed guideway, which means either A, it's rail, or it's gonna be bus rapid transit. I think right now, BRT is probably your most economical bet. I mean, to go with rail, it's really expensive, and the cost per rider is really high. And you're kind of fixed, right? Because you can augment BRT if you have enough. I mean, right now it's kind of hard. The BRT, the UVX is a little challenging because we had to get a bus that had a door on either side. If you strictly run your BRT on center running or side running, you can go ahead and just buy one bus, and you can probably interchange, right? But depending on what we have here, likely it'll be center running, because that's what we have in our State Street Master Plan. So if you were to buy other buses that could have a door on the left side, then you could, instead of having those big buses like that, I just keep looking at that picture, you can go ahead and buy a bus for probably what, I guess, a brand new bus like that is close to $1 million a piece. But I mean, you could buy shorter ones, smaller ones still for a lot less cost and use them throughout your whole network than you could if you bought another rail car. And one rail car is just gonna sit there, and you kind of, and the hard part about rail being here is that you're not gonna see rail here until we have kind of a maintenance facility here. That's half the reason why it's starting in Salt Lake County and moving from there south, is because you still gotta get that car back to that maintenance facility. Now, you could, if you were to start here and have a maintenance facility here, kind of a central hub, then those cars could go out and come back. Then it would make sense, because I think everyone realizes rail's gonna work well in Utah County, but you gotta build that facility to house them and maintain them first, and then kind of operate that way. Right now, we have the Timpanogos station, and that has all the buses, so it makes sense to have buses there. But with that being said too, they are looking at rail, but it's gonna be commuter rail, and it's gonna be south of Provo, kind of reaching down to Payson. Kind of look at, I think they're looking to use one of those lines, the Tintic line, I think it is in Springville. They have some of those alignments, and they're looking to put commuter rail in down through Payson before anywhere. So as far as rail for Orem, I don't see it happening. It'll be more of some BRT, fixed guideway. At least they'll have their own dedicated lane, and that's what will be on State Street as it happens. But I think that's I don't know if it's $1 billion, but it's a very large price tag if we want to do that sooner than later.
So currently, the UEX, the BRT is free ride still, correct?
Yeah, so what it means by free is that it's actually being supplemented by MAG funding. They actually made an application and they get some of those federal dollars to help supplement that, so it's free to some people, but it's actually still being paid for. It's like 3 years.
Was it?
Yeah, it seemed like they wanted to do that to incentivize. So, but I think even with that being said, the UVU and BYU students that get the free pass, I mean, I think on their statement, they probably pay a little bit of money for that fee, I would imagine is how it's kind of all.
They probably have it.
Yeah, it's probably all part of it.
Included. Okay, another issue, Barry and Marisa and I were talking about, Terry, and you'd be interested too, and I know Carl is. We talked about a lot of the residential neighborhoods where houses go up for sale and an investor comes in to purchase the house and then rents it. Now, I know we put in place in the code that they have to be responsible for the utilities if it's going to be a rental property. But is coming in and buying up single-family residences for the intended purpose of renting them out to students, for instance, or young single adults, however that might be. Is that problematic?
As long as they meet the ordinance of 3 students or less.
I mean, that is the biggest issue. When I have clients come in, that's, you know, something I make sure they understand, even if it looks like it could house 6 people, if you're in a single family zone, that means either a single family or 3 individuals. And despite my efforts, people are gonna do with their properties what they're gonna do. And the only way to police that really is neighbors policing that, unless you know of a better way.
No, you talked about 2, and I think we had a discussion about 2 additional officers being hired for the.
So they just started on Monday. They're not police officers, they're actually civilian employees that will actually now do the neighborhood enforcement. What do they call themselves, that neighborhood?
Neighborhood preservation team.
So there'll be 2 full-time employees that will actually do a lot more, rather than waiting for people to complain, they'll actually go out and, not, door to door, but they will drive through and find violations and do that. But still, a lot of the violations of occupancy will be based on people still submitting those in. So they're not gonna be able to tell whether a home is rented to 5 singles or 3 unless there's a really bad parking issue, which, anyway. But yeah, I think it'll take a lot more, obviously, pressure off the police, but it'll give us a little more proactive approach to enforcement.
Will they be doing things concerning NPU work that was done
So
before?
they'll be doing most of the NPU work. If it requires a police officer or some type of backup type thing, the police officer will go out with them. But the majority of their correspondence will be either through letters, emails, things like that. They will issue citations through the mail. If there's something that they physically have to go out on, I would imagine a police officer will go with them. There is one that Brady Grayson, I think, in the police department is kind of over them, so if they need a police presence, he's available to do that. So I imagine the next couple of months we'll see
presence of up to 65,000 students.
Are they now?
BYU talks about they have a cap, but
No.
as we know well, we probably have currently about 45,000 students. Because some of those are night, extended day enrollment, but they can attend daytime classes in the space of it. So if they have one night class, they can be almost a full-time daytime student, as long as they have one class. So if we look between 100 and 110,000 students, a few live at home, some, but a lot of them are living in these, because I know in Orem, we have, 4 YSA stakes? There are 14 wards in each of the 4 stakes. Each of those wards has 350 to over 400.
Or up to 900.
Yeah, well, that's actually legitimate hit,
Right.
the 900. So, that's a lot. Figure on the floor, that's about 22,000 students, or 20,000 young single adults, and where they live. We know where they live. And that's why I brought up this thing about single-family homes being repurposed as small apartments.
Typically, I say, the state prohibits the city from reducing the number of single occupants to 3. That's about the farthest we can go down. So whether they rent to 3 or rent to a family, that we're obligated to, as a family. So
As long as they're related. You can have more than 3.
you can have 3 unrelated singles.
Yeah, 3 unrelated, and then,
Or family, yeah, could have 10 kids or whatever.
So I did some quick back of the napkin projections, so do not take this as gospel, but the Kim C. Gardners who projected in 2017 that we would have 768,000 people in the valley. We're currently at about 658,000 based off 2019 numbers. So that's even behind. So that's about 12% growth per year if we just take that out for the county. And then if you assume our population currently is about 15% of the valley. So if you make the assumption that we should maintain the status quo as far as ratios amongst all the cities, which is probably not a good assumption, but if we did, that would be about 1,000 units or 1,100 units per year, assuming that the average family is about 3 persons per household now. It's about 3 to 3.4 based off the last census. I think it's declined further. So that's about 1,100 units per year. If Orem was going to keep pace with the ratio of population in the valley, now I would assume that other counties are going to start growing faster than Orem is, and so determining what we think is the fair amount of housing for Orem would say what our number of units we should add per year. So even if we cut that in half, to 7.5 or 5%, you're looking at 400 to 500 units per year to absorb the natural growth of the county.
Of course, the challenge is we don't have any land.
But I'm just saying.
Lehigh, Eagle Mountain.
That's why he's saying
Springs.
we won't grow as much
Again,
as
that's
other.
assumptions, and yeah, we're in a redevelopment state, so would redevelopment on State Street accommodate that? Would the southwest quadrant is greenfield, but how much would that accommodate? But yeah, it was just a lot of assumptions, and like I said, it's back to the napkin projections, but.
and Orem has looked ahead, for instance, State Street corridor, in certain areas where we can go vertical, which makes sense to condominiumize, or to do condominiums, or on Geneva Road also.
The other question is, what are the current percentages? Does Alpine have the same percent of rentals we do, and does Mapleton?
No, they don't. This is just considering housing units, not tenure of those units, whether those are owner or rental. That's a whole other policy consideration that I probably can't whip out in the next 5 minutes. Give me 20. like I said, don't take any of that as gospel, it's just.
No, no.
Well, now that Sean is here, let's take a 5-minute recess. Jason.
When I was in Japan.
Okay. Jason, you ready? We ready? Huh? Well, we'll wait. Oh, that's okay. We'll be happy to wait for Mr. Bench. Okay. We'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Orem City Planning Commission meeting. We just went dark again. We have asked, you said it last time, didn't you, Sean? Mm-hmm. Marisa said it before. Barry, we've asked Mr. Roberts to offer the invocation tonight. Thank you.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered here together, and we ask thee to bless us with thy Spirit. Help us to know what thou would have us to do and to make wise decisions and to do what's best for the residents of Orem. And we pray for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks. Well, it's nice not having to read any preliminary information where we can just get down to business for the Planning Commission. So we'll turn the time over to Mr. Bench. Presentation.
I accidentally put a mint in my mouth before, so I apologize for slurping mint, sorry. So tonight, before you, the first item is an office building at 1600 North, 1385 West. The applicants are proposing to locate an office building behind the existing Maverick. There, the Bowen and Levitt. Let me turn on my Bowen and Levitt. Security Metrics building is here. This is the property right here. There's some condominium at this location. The applicants are proposing to put a 3-story office building here, 3 levels. There'll be a podium parking underneath. The setback from this corner to the residential property has to be equal to the height of the structure. The structure at this corner is 60 feet. Of course, the setback is 73.82, so that does more than comply with the requirement. Parking is required at 1 space for 250 square feet. They have 171 parking stalls that are required based on the 42,000 square feet of gross leasable. So they do meet that requirement as well. Landscaping, any areas that are open, end islands, things like that will be landscaped. This will be their detention that will go down and an existing detention that runs west under I-15. Let's see. Again, this is the lower level with the parking and then 3 stories above. So these are the elevations. This is a better view here. So the east elevation that you'll see from I-15, or excuse me, going eastbound. So from the Security Metrics building, north from the Maverick, west as you drive by I-15. This is the view you'll see here, and then the south from the apartment complex. So the building will be located generally in this location with the ramp coming up here and wrapping around into the parking field here. Access will be out on 1600 North at this location, and they are able to come up and wrap around and have another access on 16th. There is a gate here that prohibits any access through Security Metrics, so their 2 access points will be limited to that location on 1600 North. They did hold a neighborhood meeting I don't know that there's any major issues with that. There is a requirement for a masonry wall along this property line. There is an existing fence that you can see, but it does need to be masonry, so they will have to replace that unless they choose to go to the council to get a modification to that requirement. That is an option, but we would request that a condition be placed on any motion tonight that a masonry wall be required on that property line. And that's all that I have. Any questions that I can address? I know the applicants are here if you want to hear from them as well.
Paul, do you want to add anything to that? Thank you. Paul Washburn, by the way.
Thank you. I'm representing the owner of the property tonight, and the requirement for the masonry wall, we agree with that. I don't know why we didn't put it on the plat, but ordinance is pretty clear that's what you have to have, and we don't have any questions with that at all. The only other comment I'd like to make is the access here off 1600 North. I'm sure if you've looked at it, that's a tough area over there. That access is controlled by UDOT. We have agreed with them. We're going to be putting in an acceleration and deceleration lane going into the property. That'll improve things greatly for us, and it'll also improve things greatly for the existing Maverick. So we feel like we can handle the access issues pretty well. 4:30, between 4:30 and 5:15, I expect they want to get on I-15. They're going to make a right-hand turn, go down 1200 North and enter from 8th North. And all of us that have offices on 1200 West or that lowest part next to I-15 have to make similar accommodations. I've had to go home myself via 1600 North many times, even though I'm on 8th North, but it all works. So anyway, any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, council or commission, any questions for Mr. Washburn?
So is there and I don't know if this is for you, Paul, or Jason, but to have the second access, is there an agreement between those properties?
It's been previously platted that has a reciprocal across the Bowen and Levitt property.
I do have a question, and it might not apply to this property specifically, but with the fence and wall requirements, it's my understanding that those are to prevent noise and traffic from entering the, interfering with the residential uses. Is it possible to put a pedestrian access in the fence? I know if I were living in those condos, I would love to be able to access those offices or Maverick through that small back.
I imagine through an agreement, right, with the two property owners, they could put a man or woman gate in this case in that. It would have to be an agreement though between the two. The city can't require that, but together they could privately do that.
So, and it's something that they would have to ask the city for special permission to do?
No, as long as it's a gate that can be closed, we do allow gates in those masonry walls that are required.
Just a comment, between ourselves and the condominium project, there is a real severe grade difference. I don't know how practical putting a gate would be there. Even without much of a fence there now, I haven't noticed anybody trying to sneak through there.
Yeah.
Not that we would care, but if they were to approach us about it, I think we'd be willing to cooperate.
Thank you. It's just curious as someone who tries to access businesses not by vehicle frequently.
Yeah.
Access us, but Maverick's pretty attractive, so.
Yeah, you get a nice slushy there or something, I don't know, whatever they're called. Frosties, slushies, who knows? Thank you, Paul, appreciate it. Anything else? All right, then this is a site plan approval. So let's,
I can make a motion.
thank you.
I move that we approve the site plan of 1600 North office located at 1385 West, 1600 North in the HS zone with the condition that a masonry wall be installed on the south property line adjacent to the R6 zone.
Marisa seconds. Then those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Let's go to item 3.2. Paul, thank you again. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Item 3.2 is a plat amendment. There's an existing one-lot subdivision. The owner is here to amend it into two lots. The property itself is located at 160 West, 1600 South. It is currently in the R8 zone, as you can see on this map. They do have some significant slope issues, as you can see on the side of that shows the contours. Here is the slope analysis map, which shows the green are slopes below either 20 or less. The yellow are between 20 and 35, and the red are 35 and greater. The ordinances are pretty restrictive as far as cutting into hillsides or shaving hillsides from the top down, but it does allow a certain percentage. In this case, slopes 35 or greater can have a 25% grading portion, so you can see the lot that's at this location here. That part is within the buildable area, but it is less than the 25%, along with the yellow portions that you see is less than the 50% that's allowed. So the buildable area that they're proposing, the majority of it is 20% or less. There is a slight area that will be cut, but that are graded, but that is part of allowable within the ordinance itself. So they are proposing to do 2 lots. The existing home is on lot 2. The proposed home is going to be at this location, lot 1, and then this lot will wrap around, which this area has the significant slopes. So here's the photos from 16th South. You can see the existing home driveway. This will be the area where the new home will go, and then this, of course, is the hidden hollow side, which you can see is pretty significant as far as slopes, and any access to that would be pretty restrictive. So staff recommends that the 2-lot subdivision be approved. Any questions that I can address?
Any applicant you have anything you'd like to add? Please.
My name's Forrest Phillips. My company owns the lot, Forrest Phillips Construction LLC. We've complied with all the slope regulations, the setbacks. We've worked it out. We've been working with engineering now for about 6 months, trying to make sure we could meet all the regulations. So I believe we've met everything. We're at this point, so I don't know if there's any questions for me at this point, but it all works as far as we're aware.
I was just wondering, of course, whoever builds on here, well, the landscaping requirements, it has to be, but that's an art or a discussion for another day.
Yeah, well, part of the landscaping requirements is say, another day.
Yeah.
My company will, in fact, be building on the lot, so I'll be responsible. We've already submitted a grading plan and a site plan so we could get to this point because of the hillside ordinance, which has been approved. So, as I said, if there's no other questions, it's...
No, that's great. Thank you, Forrest. Appreciate your coming. Well, if there's no questions, shall we?
It is a public hearing.
It is a public hearing, so thank you, Carl. We'll open this for public hearing, and would invite anybody that would like to comment to come forward, state your name. As there's no movement from our attendees, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion and turn it back to the commission for a motion. Thanks, Barry.
I move that we vacate Lot 1, Coy Plat A, and final plat approval of Hills Hidden subdivision with 2 lots at 160 West, 1600 South in the R8 zone.
I'll second that and turn it to the commission for a vote. Shauna, go ahead.
Aye.
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 Let's move on. Thank you, Forrest. Appreciate it.
Item 3.3 is an existing fourplex. They are proposing, it's a lot of record, so this is not a public hearing. It is simply a request to finalize a plat that would convert the 4 units into townhomes. The owner of each of the lots or units would own from the ground up, and the remaining portion would be common area. So it is an existing structure. You can see the 4 units there. The parking would be held in common. They have met the requirements that are necessary to convert those and separate those into individual units. So at the county, they would be 4 separate for sale units. You can see this is the townhome in the back, so it accesses this out to the street. Any questions?
Commission? No questions. Applicant, is the applicant here? Roger, are you representing? Anything? Well, pertinent to this particular project, I'm sure. Thank you. Then we'll turn it back to the commission then for.
I'll make that motion. I move that we approve the final plat of 369 North Main Townhomes, Plat A, planned unit development, located generally at 369 North Main Street in the R7.5 zone.
I'll second.
Carl seconds. In favor then, we'll start down here. Marisa?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. I was trying to confuse you and I apologize for that. We had 5 ayes, not 6.
Item 3.4 is another, plat amendment, taking a one lot and basically eliminating one of the PUEs on the south side. Simply, it's in the R75 zone, but what they're proposing is to eliminate the 8-foot PUE on the south side, anticipating a pool to be built on that location. We did receive all the letters from all the utility companies. There's no issue with them vacating that. So at this point, they're proposing this plat be approved.
Questions? Any of you? All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing portion. And we
Do you have any comments, Terry?
acknowledge that Terry Peterson. There is no movement toward the microphone, so we will close the public hearing portion of this and turn it back to the commission for a motion.
I move the Planning Commission vacate Lot 11 of Orem Orchards, Plat A, and approve Lot 1 of Orem Orchards, Plat B, located at 329 West, 350 South in the R7.5 zone.
And I will second that motion and turn it back. Shana?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. In the affirmative. Great. So next that we have on here, is there any, is somebody representing any from the city? Jason?
Oh, yeah, but I have no issue.
Nothing? Okay, nothing to bring up. We'll close that part. And on the minutes, they're next. Any glaring corrections that should occur for the minutes? They look really good again. All right. Then,
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Cook here. Oh, it should go from Barry? Well, should we go? Yours? We're going to take Mr. Roberts. Barry is, Carl has acquiesced. Marisa?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second by Marisa. Shauna?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned until July 21st. Correct.